Okay. Hi, this is Pastor Josh from First Baptist Queen, and thank you for joining us on our reading through the Bible every day in this journey to see the impact of God's Word and what it has on our lives. Today, we are going to be in Genesis chapter 50, is where we're going to start, and then we'll jump over to the New Testament, get a little bit of Psalms and a little bit of Proverbs as well. So Genesis chapter 50, starting in verse 1. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it, for that is how many are required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. So because of Joseph's impact on the country, his grief is turned into a national grief, and everybody is experiencing that expression of sadness that Joseph has over losing his father after getting him back after so many years. Verse 4. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, I'm about to die in my tomb, that I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan. There shall you bury me. Now, therefore, let me go up and bury my father. Then I will return. And Pharaoh answered, Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. So all of Joseph and his generation, as well as Egyptian officials, go up to bury Joseph's father, Jacob, or Israel. Verse 10. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and grievous lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians. Therefore the place was named Abel Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. That means mourning of Egypt. Verse 12. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field at Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So now it has been decades since the brothers sold Joseph into slavery. Jacob, Israel, had come down and lived in Egypt for 17 years. So it's a significant amount of time. And now that Israel has died, Joseph's brothers begin to worry that he is going to exact revenge on them as second in command of Egypt. He's got enormous power and authority. And so the brothers fear that possibly Joseph has been holding on to this grudge against them all this time. Verse 16. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. So they send a message to Joseph saying, Your dead father, before he died, his dying wish was that you would forgive your brothers. Let's see. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Verse 18. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, Behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Joseph has told them this before. And so he's reminding them that, yes, they meant it for evil in selling Joseph, but God was going to use this evil to accomplish great things. And he did. He saved a whole bunch of lives. And Joseph is telling them this. Verse 21. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So he says, not only, guys, I'm not going to kill you, is what he says. I'm going to provide everything that you and your children and your descendants are going to need. I'm going to make sure everyone is well taken care of and nobody struggles from this point forward. Verse 22. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years, and Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were counted as Joseph's own. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him and put him in a coffin in Egypt. So Joseph, just like his father, made his relatives promise that when he died, that a number of years in the future, which it's when the Israelites leave slavery, when they leave, when God takes them out of Egypt, to take his bones and bury him back in the Promised Land. Joseph, and we don't know the extent of what Joseph knew that was soon to happen. He knew some, but he didn't know all. Maybe God had given him a glimpse of what was going to come, but whatever it is, he knew some. Now, the book of Exodus, chapter 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel, who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. Now you may be saying, well, how is it that Pharaoh is going to come up in Egypt and not know Egypt's history and all that Joseph did? Well, a lot transpired during this period of time. Kings came and went. Attacks came from outside people who were not Egyptians, came in and attacked the Egyptians, so that when this new king comes back to Egypt and fights and gets rid of these foreign enemies, that he is going to become very wary of any non-Egyptians that are around, and that is what happens. Because of the betrayal and the attack that had occurred, he is now paranoid against any non-Egyptians. Verse 9. And he said to his people, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. So worried that there will be a repeat of what had happened previously, that these non-Egyptians will fight against Egypt, and possibly because the number of the people of Israel take over, he says we need to force them into slavery. Verse 11. Therefore they set taskmasters over them, to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people Israel. So more and more Israelite children are born, and they're spreading out all around the country because there's so many of them. The Egyptians were in dread. Verse 13. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. So they're trying to slow the birth rate of the Israelites and saying, kill all the boys and let the girls live, and then there won't be boys to marry the Israelite girls and make more Israelites. Verse 17. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the midwives who were delivering the babies wanted to honor the Lord more than they feared Pharaoh. And so they did not kill the male children. Verse 18. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this, and let the male children live? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So basically they're saying the Egyptian women are weak and they need all this help, but the Israelite women are strong. They don't need this help. They just have the babies before we even walk in the door. Verse 20. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. So the midwives protected God's people. Verse 22. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. So because Pharaoh's plan to wipe out the Israelite generations by killing off all the boys didn't work with the midwives, basically Pharaoh issues a law allowing every Egyptian, if they see a baby Israelite, they can grab that baby Israelite and toss it straight into the Nile with no repercussions, because they would be safe under the law. They don't have to be military doing this. They don't have to be Egyptian officials doing this. Just any Egyptian has the right to grab a Hebrew baby boy, an Israelite baby boy, and toss him in the river. So this is a scary time to be an Israelite. Chapter 2. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch, so making it waterproof. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank, probably hoping that the lapping of the waves along the riverbank might rock the child to sleep. Verse 4. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. So this is Pharaoh's daughter. She knows the law. As Pharaoh's daughter, she is supposed to take this baby and toss him in the river. But the baby's crying, and she has great compassion, and her heart goes out to this baby. Verse 7, as she's looking at the child, the baby's sister, then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So Pharaoh's daughter now instantly wants to defy her father and save this baby. And so the baby's sister, goes. So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, because she said, I drew him out of the water. So Pharaoh's daughter names Moses. And Moses is going to be raised, nursed by his own mother, and she is going to be paid for it. But then Moses will grow once he is done being weaned. He will grow in Pharaoh's household. Now let's go over to the book of Matthew, chapter 16, starting in verse 13. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he said to his disciples, Who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He said to them, But who do you say I am? Simon Peter replied, You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, that is, son of Jonah, Simon, son of Jonah. For flesh and blood have not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. So Jesus initially asked the disciples, Who do all the people say I am? Who do they say I am? And they say, they say maybe one of the prophets, maybe John the Baptist come back from the dead, which we learned earlier, Herod had said that. And Jesus said, But who do you guys say I am? And Peter speaks up and says, You're the Christ, you're the Son of God, you're the Messiah who's coming. And Jesus said, Yes, only God could have revealed that to you. Verse 18. And I tell you, Peter, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. On this rock, this teaching that Jesus is the Son of God is the foundation stone, the rock upon which we as a church are built. That is our foundation, Jesus being the Son of God. Nothing can prevail against it, can conquer it. Verse 19, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. That is speaking to us sharing the gospel. That we have the within our hands with the commission to tell people about Jesus. We have the authority to point them towards heaven or point them towards hell. And so it is our responsibility to bind them to heaven, to give them the gospel, to tell them about Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, forgiveness of their sins. Verse 20. Then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and scribes and be killed and on the third day raised. This is key, right? Jesus tells them it's going to come down to me being arrested, me being beaten. I'm going to suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and scribes. So the religious leaders are going to take me and beat me. And he says, and they're going to kill me. But don't worry, on the third day, I'm going to raise from the dead. Verse 22. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. You know, maybe initially they thought he was talking metaphorically, like a parable. He's going to die and raise from the dead. But then it began to sink in. Maybe he's really talking realistically here. And Peter takes him aside and says, No. You don't know, Jesus. The Son of God doesn't have to die and doesn't have to raise from the dead. And so he's telling Jesus that Jesus is wrong about what's going to happen. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me. For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. He's telling Peter in the hearing of the disciples, you're not thinking about the ways of God. You're not thinking about what God has planned and God's intention to save humanity. You're only thinking about yourself and how you think things should play out. Verse 24. Then Jesus told his disciples, If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So to save your life, you have to lose it. You have to give it to God. But then he says that interesting statement there at the end. Some of you people standing here will not die before you see the Son of Man, Jesus, in his kingdom, coming in his kingdom, having his glory revealed. And that plays directly into what happens next. He's not saying these guys are going to live for thousands of years physically on this earth. He's referring to what happens next. Chapter 17. And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. So he's transfigured. His clothes become white as light. They get a tiny glimpse of his glory. This is the revealing of his kingdom that will ultimately, his glory will ultimately come when he dies and raises from the dead. And so now Moses and Elijah appear. Moses being a representation of the law, Elijah being a representation of the prophets. This is the whole Old Testament speaking to Jesus, who is a fulfillment of the whole Old Testament. Verse 5, he was still speaking when, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." Now, I love this imagery. This imagery is phenomenal to me. That the cloud comes, and it says that the voice comes from the cloud. So imagine this incredibly thick fog that you cannot see through, and from the fog, from the cloud that is surrounding you completely, the voice is reverberating from every angle of this fog, of this cloud. Verse 6, when the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise and have no fear." And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead." So keep this to yourselves until I come back from the dead. Now let's go over to Psalm 21. To the choir master, a Psalm of David. Verse 1. O Lord, in your strength the king rejoices. So only in the strength of the Lord can we rejoice. And in your salvation, how greatly he exults. You have given him his heart's desire and have not withheld the request of his lips. For you meet him with rich blessings and have set a crown of fine gold upon his head. He asked life of you. You gave it to him. Length of days forever and ever. His glory is great through your salvation. Splendor and majesty you bestow on him. God provides every which way. For you make him most blessed forever. You make him glad with the joy of your presence. For the king trusts in the Lord, and through the steadfast love of the Most High he shall not be moved. Your hand will find out all your enemies. Your right hand will find out those who hate you. You will make them as a blazing oven when you appear. The Lord will swallow them up in his wrath, and fire will consume them. You will destroy their descendants from the earth, and their offspring from among the children of man. Though they plan evil against you, though they devise mischief, they will not succeed. You try to fight against God, you're not going to win. For you will put them to flight. You will aim at their faces with your bows. Be exalted, O Lord, in your strength. We will sing and praise your power. Let's go over to Proverbs chapter 5. Verse 1, my son, be attentive to my wisdom, incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion and your lips may guard knowledge. For the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil, but in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps follow the path to Sheol, the grave. She does not ponder the path of life, her ways wander, and she does not know it. This is a temptation. It may look good, it may appear good in the moment and you really want to partake of the temptation, but in the end, it will get you every single time. So turn to the Lord rather than the temptation. Turn to the Lord and He will deliver you from the temptation. So thank you today for checking out day 25 of our reading through the Bible every day. I hope you'll join us tomorrow as we dive into day 26 and continue on through Exodus and Matthew and Psalms and Proverbs. I'll see you tomorrow.